Hey folks, and welcome to Typology, the show in which we explore the mystery of the human personality through the lens of the Enneagram. I'm Anthony Skinner, producer of the show. We've got another great guest for you today, Brian McLaren. He is an author, speaker, activist, and public theologian, a former college English teacher and pastor. He works with people of all faiths. Brian is a faculty member of the Living School, which is a part of the Center for Action and Contemplation. He's appeared on many radio and TV broadcasts, including NPR, Larry King Live, Religion and Ethics News Weekly, and Nightline. He has also been covered in Time, where he was listed as one of America's 25 most influential evangelicals. He's also appeared in Christianity Today, Christian Century, and the Washington Post, and many other print media. We're happy to have Brian with us today, and Ian will tell you about some of his latest projects that he's involved in. So hey, let's get on with the program. That's it for me, Anthony Skinner. And now, here is the host of our show, Ian Cron.
Brian McLaren, welcome to Typology.
I'm happy to be with you, Ian. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time. I was thinking on my way into the studio today that of two things. One was when when we first met, and then another incident that happened between you and I that was life-changing for me. Both of those were life-changing events. You probably don't remember when we first met.
I remember going to Israel, but I know that's not when we met.
Oh, that's right. All right, so it was 2001, and I was sitting in a coffee shop in Old Greenwich, Connecticut, and I was reading a book, and it was A New Kind of Christian.
Okay.
And I had happened on that book after reading another book called The Post-Evangelical.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember reading A New Kind of Christian, which was this book that you had written, and thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this guy is like describing in uncannily accurate terms my life right now. Mm-hmm. So being the somewhat assertive person that I am, I reached out to you. You were at a church in Maryland at the time.
That's right.
And you said, well, why don't you just come and spend a day with me? And I drove down, and we hung out for an entire day together.
I remember that day. That's when we first met. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I took a train, and you had to come pick me up at the train. Now that I remember that, it's all coming clear to me now.
And I was so thrilled to find such a gifted musician. I have a new friend who is a gifted musician. That was, I also remember that. Yes.
And then another big sort of watershed moment in my relationship with you came. I remember we were sitting somewhere in a restaurant, and I said to you, I've had this idea about a book for a long time. I had written no books. And I said, it's this book about St. Francis and how, back then, I said, the kind of Christian everyone was trying to say they wanted to become. I said, well, they just want to be St. Francis. I mean, and you said, that's a great idea for a book. You need to write that book. And that's what inspired me. Your encouragement actually is what inspired me to write Chasing Francis.
That's great.
Well, that was such a good book. I was feeling pretty good today, but now I'm feeling way better.
Well, I mean, in all honesty, I probably would not have written that book had not a author who I admired encouraged me to write it and gave the idea a thumbs up in terms of its potential.
Well, I don't know if I told you this at the time, but I've read a lot of biographies. I love biographies, but I've read more biographies of St. Francis than anyone else. So and my curiosity and interest is as high as ever. He's such a amazing, enigmatic, complex, and yet simple character.
Oh man.
And just his role in history is so interesting, and it just feels so bizarrely relevant to this moment. So
oh my gosh, yeah. He's this timeless, wild, quixotic. He's just as he's been called, the last Christian.
Yes, maybe the first and maybe the last.
Yeah, I mean that's Francis all in a nut. And of course, we spent 10 days together in Israel.
Yes, that's right.
My word. We've had some adventures.
Some water has gone under the bridge for us. That's right. So it's good to be with you again.
It is. Well, Brian, Enneagram. I know you've known the Enneagram for a long time. When did you first learn about the Enneagram?
I don't know when. I heard about it, and then I just did a quick and dirty orient myself. And then Suzanne Stabile, your previous writing partner, and I became friends, and I actually got to sit in on her whole week-long course that she did, and because we were teaching together at the same place. And so that was probably the week I felt like I went from being a kindergartner to at least a fourth grader.
Right. And you determined that you were an Enneagram 4.
Yes. I'll tell you something interesting. When I first started exposing myself, this might just be absolutely typical of 4s for all I know, but I really had a hard time because I felt like I had the weaknesses of every different kind.
Yeah.
And but I was actually having dinner with Richard Rohr, telling him my frustration, and as he listened, he said, you sound to me like a 4 who flips back and forth between a 3 and a 5 wing. He said that happens sometimes. And that, as soon as he said that, I felt like that gave me permission to actually be a 4 or see myself that way. Yeah.
Yeah. That those wings are interesting because, they're really resource points. There are points on the Enneagram where we can sort of tap into their strengths and potential weaknesses and, bring them back to the village of 4, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And put them to service. I think in my own life, I'm a 4 with a 3 wing, and but as I get older, definitely more a 4 with a 5 wing.
Well, that's I'd say that's very much how it is for me. My years as a pastor, 3-ness was really, really necessary. I had a public role, and I approached it. I became a pastor in the 80s and 90s, and that was a very success-oriented period for pastors, and so I really tapped into the 3 world then. But the part of me that wanted to be a writer, the part of me that, I'd been a lit major, that part of me was always there. So,
Yeah, I know how I was a pastor in the 80s as well, and I think that's why a new kind of Christian, resonated so deeply with me. I was a 4. And I was in Greenwich, Connecticut, the epicenter of 3s. And,
yeah, that's right.
and I was burning so many calories trying to act like a 3 all the time when I was a 4.
Yes. Yes.
And I felt so disillusioned and disappointed, and sort of a perpetual feeling that I was failing, that I was inauthentic because I was trying to, make it with these high flyer Wall Street types and get them to come to my church. I mean, there was all this
yes.
angst all the time. And I was a literature major. I was an English literature major. I was, drawn to the arts, not to business. I was, it was
right.
This strange dance and of course that was the era of, the Bill Hybels and these other huge churches that were growing, and comparing yourself to them, and et cetera, et cetera. It was an odd time. It was a very odd time.
Yeah.
To be a 4.
Yeah, that's right. And it's funny, isn't it? I mean, I don't know your particular philosophy on all this. I was kind of I don't know if you've had much exposure to Jerome Lubbe and his book on the Enneagram. But he, one of the things he says is, look, when we're talking about these 9 types, these are all capacities of the brain, and different individuals, but maybe different cultures, maybe different religions or denominations. They specialize, they lean. There's a kind of standard of success where everybody wants to play that role, and it's in our lifetime. I think a lot of religion really worked well for 6s because it catered toward things like fear and loyalty and being kind of a good soldier and so on. But then churches reached a rough patch, and some creativity was needed. So 4 voices were needed, and entrepreneurship was needed. So, 3 voices came up, and other times I'm sure 8's, everybody wants to line up behind some very powerful leader. So, and of course, maybe if we're Pentecostal, we especially like 7s, and we want to at least have some fun when we go to church. And so you just see all these different swings in the religious world, and in some ways, it makes perfect sense. Different forms of our religion suppress different parts of us and express different parts of us, and we all have the sense that whatever spirituality and religion are, they should be liberating, and they should allow us to thrive and, well, in Jesus' words, have abundant life. So.
Yes, I'm oftentimes trying to communicate, to tell people that, and I said this the other day at a workshop. I said, you are not your number. And I think that's one of the misapplications.
That's right.
That I see in the world around me now is, you go on the internet, or you go on Instagram, and there are now 1 million self-proclaimed Enneagram experts. And they, I'm a 7, or I'm a 2, or I'm a 3. And I understand the what's being expressed there. Yes. But unfortunately, what's not being said in the same breath is, no, actually, this is a set of adaptive stratagems, ways of being in the world that I adopted as a little person to conform to what I thought others wanted me to be in order to get my needs met.
Yes.
And of course, what it's talking about, and Richard and I had a conversation about this, is what the Enneagram reveals is not who you are, but who you aren't. In the sense that your core Enneagram type is describing in many ways your false self, not your true self, which is hidden beneath it.
That's interesting. Yeah. And I don't know how much you've gotten into this, and I'm not an expert, but I'm deeply curious in all the neurology and brain research and so on. But I've been intrigued by this idea of the modular brain. Apparently, brain experts are saying that they can map out discrete modules of the brain, and a lot of people right now are using the number 52 empirically identifiable modules of the brain. And if you think about that and those different modules combine into, modules of modules and so on. And some people, we can talk about the left brain and the right brain, or we can talk about a 3-part brain system of the brain stem and the reptilian brain, the reptilian brain and the mammalian brain and the primate brain, all these different ways to talk about how these modules work together. But it just makes sense that we would develop habitual ways of negotiating these different modules. And of course, as far as I know, nobody has any idea what consciousness is, but it seems to me to be some kind of emergent property from having so many of these modules being in conversation with each other at the speed of light virtually, or so much faster than we could ever be conscious of. I mean, you just realize we are, and that's why to have these 9 types is a tool, but the complexity of any one of us and the complexity of what's happening in the time I'm uttering this sentence we'll never understand it as long as we live.
No. And that's why I'm always, as there's this Enneagram fever thing, and which both, delights and troubles me, and I think I'm always in favor of people who have an interest in self-knowledge and wanting to learn to move more skillfully through the world. I'm all in favor of that. I don't like it when it becomes reductive and silly, simplistic, if not cartoonish, kinds of representations. That's not what the Enneagram was designed for. And I get so disheartened sometimes when I see these trivializing pieces, in blogs or in, wherever, people typing their different dogs and, whatever else there may be. It seems to be such an insult to such a really powerful piece of spiritual technology, really.
That I couldn't agree more. And as soon as you say that, I think, we humans do that to everything, don't we? A word like, the word Christian, people turn that into a cartoon.
Right.
And a word like democracy or socialism or capitalism or freedom or whatever, all of these things are so easily turned into reductions and slogans. And they have some kind of currency in power. Like, to me, the Enneagram used at its best is a way of having grace for myself and grace for other people. It's a way for me to step above just saying he's good, he's bad, she's normal, he's abnormal, whatever. It's a way of nuancing that. But we've all seen people say, "Oh, that's just the way I am," and then it becomes their excuse, sort of their get out of jail free card for being a jerk.
Right.
And so we human beings there's nothing foolproof.
That's
can
right.
Make a mess out of anything.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about these 52 modules in the brain, and I've done a lot of that reading too. A lot of the work, particularly as I was introduced to it through the topic of trauma, right?
Yeah.
And I think what and again, our listeners will roll their eyes because I say this so often, but it's important to keep in mind these are low resolution pictures.
That's a great way to say it. I love that.
And they are a beginning point of conversation, I think, that a person can have between themselves and the mystery of their own lives.
Yes.
And of the mystery of who God is in the world. And if the Enneagram can serve as a portalway into a deeper conversation about who we are and why we are and how we can show up for life in better, healthier, emotionally wiser ways, I mean, that thrills me, But, I would like to see the level of intellectual engagement with the Enneagram as it now stands on the internet to get a little higher.
Well, you're trying to remedy that one podcast at a time. So.
Right, with one guest like you at a time, Brian. No question about it. So you discovered you were a 4, and what I'm curious to know is, well, so what? What have you done with it? How has that worked its way, if it has, into your self-understanding, your spirituality, your daily practice, the way you see the world? How has it affected you in your life?
It's helped me understand ways that I sabotage myself. I had this saying in my years as a pastor that I don't know where it came from. It's just sort of an intuitive saying. And here's what it was. When you're a pastor, as you know, you get a lot of criticism. Anything you do, you get criticized by somebody for virtually. And my first reaction whenever somebody criticized me was to say they were right. Because the self-scrutinizing part of me, I could always see, I would think to myself, you think that's bad? I'm way worse than that. There was this self-critical part of me. And the term I use for it is I would sell the store. Somebody want to return a product and I would sell the store. And I was so hard on myself. And I had this very emotional experience one day. I can't even remember I guess this would have been in the 90s. And I'm sure a lot of people are like this, but over the years, I gained weight, and then I've got to go on a diet and exercise and get it back down to some acceptable levels, and then it sneaks back up. So I was in one of those periods where I was jogging and trying to, get my weight down, and I was jogging around a river, a lake, and I always listened to. Do you remember cassette tapes?
Vaguely.
Yeah, they were amazing technology. And remember the Walkman? So I had a Walkman with little ear headphones, and I'm running around this lake. And I found that if I listened to motivational tapes, it just kept my mind off how much my lungs hated it when I ran and how much my legs hated it when I ran, but especially my lungs. And so I'm listening to some tape, and the guy on the tape, sometimes I listen to theology, but this was just some motivational speaker. And he quoted a quote. You know how motivational speakers like to quote famous people. So he quoted Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln said something like this: "I've tried to conduct myself while in office in such a way so that when I leave this office, though I've lost every other friend on earth, I will still have a friend down inside of me." And when that little line, "friend down inside of me," when it came to my consciousness, Ian, I stopped running. I bent over. I had my hands on my knees, and I started to cry. I had like snot pouring out of my nose. I was scared. Like, am I having? Is this what a nervous breakdown feels like? Like, I was really scared. But something erupted out of me, and so I walked another lap around this lake, and I remember the conversation was going on in my brain. I do not have a friend down inside of me. I am always feeling something is wrong with me. I'm always focused on my flaws. And if I don't learn, a lot of people say they're way nicer to themselves than they are to anybody else. I realize I am way nicer to everybody else than I am to myself.
Amen.
And I just remember thinking, I'm not going to survive if I don't know how to become a friend to myself. And I would say the idea, first, that sort of diagnosis that fours tend to be like that, this constant sense there's something wrong with me, part of it, that helped me and gave me sort of, that diagnosis was validating. But then it gave me permission to say, so many of the things that I'm ready to say are wrong with me are side effects of my sensitivity. And in fact, I was just talking to a friend. You might know Reba Riley, who's an author, really nice, wonderful person. And she just this morning said to me, she said, it's hard to be sensitive. It's your superpower and it's your kryptonite. And I think that's maybe the greatest thing that this understanding of fours has done for me. It's helped me understand that my superpower is my kryptonite, and that sensitivity is a gift, but it also is it's like a wound. It's like a vulnerability. Yeah.
Hey, Anthony.
Yeah.
I've been working on my latest book, right?
I do.
Well, part of my process is researching topics related to my content.
Okay.
But as you can imagine, there are tons of resources out there. So let me tell you about one of my ultimate life hacks.
Please tell us.
It's called Blinkist. If you haven't heard of it, Blinkist takes the best need-to-know information from thousands of nonfiction books and condenses them down into just 15 minutes that you can read or listen to. I like Blinkist because it quickly gives me the main points of a book, which helps me evaluate which books I want to make time to read in full later and which ones to prioritize now for the projects I'm working on. And since Blinkist works on my phone, my tablet, or in a web browser, I use it anywhere, whether I'm traveling, making breakfast, working out, you name it. I've listened to and highly recommend Daniel Nettles' book, Personality, and Michelle Obama's book, Becoming. I love both of them. You can even read or listen to the key takeaways from The Road Back to You by yours truly.
I like that.
With Blinkist, you get unlimited access to read or listen to a massive library of condensed nonfiction books. All the books you want and all for one low price. Now check this out. Right now, for a limited time, Blinkist has a special offer just for our Typology audience. Go to Blinkist.com/Typology. Try it free for 7 days and save 25% off your new subscription. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist, Blinkist.com/typology. That's TYPOLOGY to start your free 7-day trial. And you'll also save 25% off, but only when you sign up at Blinkist.com/typology. Well, and I think, isn't it that kind of the magic sauce of the 4 is, in a way, the wound is the gift that we bring to the world, but it has to be it has to be managed so carefully.
Oh man!
Because I can think of as you know, a long list of 4s who self-destructed.
Yes.
Because the wound overtook them. And now, rather than it producing generative, creative, beautiful things, it literally consumed them from the inside out. That wound of abandonment, of loss. The 4s and the 5s, it was interesting, we were talking with someone the other day, 4 and 5 is at the bottom of the Enneagram, and there's a big gap between them. It's the biggest gap between two numbers on the Enneagram, right?
Yeah.
And we talk about that space between them as the abyss. So it's interesting, 4s and 5s are always looking over the lip into the abyss.
Wow. Yes.
So like you ever met a 5 who's like, I mean, I hate to say it, here's a terrible example of a this is a 5 who's so unhealthy, it may not even be helpful, right? But the Unabomber, you know what I mean? Like, looking down into the abyss, Kurt Cobain, Sylvia Plath, all these people who, and they can become Nietzschean even, that kind of like they're into reading Nietzsche at 19 and 29 and 39, and they're always looking into the what my wife calls the tunnel at the end of the light.
Oh man, I'll remember that line. Oh my goodness.
She's always like, but 4s and 5s, man, they can always see the tunnel at the end of the light.
Yes.
Because they are at the bottom of the Enneagram and they're looking down into the abyss. And they're the only 2 numbers that do that, that look into the abyss like that. And so if they don't, protect the wound, keep it clean, and make sure that it's not consuming them, if they don't do that, they're bound for trouble. They are too sensitive for this world.
When I was a senior in college and a senior in high school and a freshman in college that year, maybe 18 months, I had my first period of depression that scared me, that felt like more than a mood. And I remember feeling, at 17 or 18, you're just figuring out that you're alive, but I remember thinking, I'm pretty smart. I've got some talent. I've got some skill, but I could totally go off the rails. I could totally consume myself. I remember feeling that. And I'm curious, because you do so much of this work, help me understand how that happens. Like, how do you see that happen for 4s? Because this is so much of your professional life now. Yeah.
Well, I definitely think that 4s are more susceptible to depression than lots of other numbers. I mean, any number can fall into a depression, right?
Yeah.
But I think 4s have a particular vulnerability toward it. I went through a very bad depression in my senior year in college that revisited me again when I was 27, which was also the year that I had my first attempt at sobriety, and which of course is another conversation we could have about 4s and addictions. I think it's that fours, the world is just too much with them, and there is, when you are carrying around this secret belief that there is something unredeemably deficient about who you are, and that you really can't share the depths of it with another person. What else can you feel except a sense of what I would say sometimes, I've asked it before, is what you're feeling depression or desolation? Because sometimes, it's a clinically diagnosable depression, right? But a lot of times I just meet fours who are in a space of desolation. They're feeling desolate, and they're feeling so misunderstood by themselves and by other people. And it's a complicated type, and sometimes with fours, they become addicted to their suffering and their depression. I mean, there's a sweetness to it almost.
Yeah.
Like, who would I be without this orientation to the world? This is my unique contribution is my darkness or something, And so trying to talk a four into the idea that everybody else suffers, like it's like, I'm a big fan of, we haven't spoken about this much, but in the last 10 years, I've spent a tremendous amount of time studying Tibetan Buddhism. And, the Buddhists are onto something when they say, life is suffering, and that nobody feels at home here. And unfortunately, fours feel that they're the only people who don't feel at home here.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny as you say that, I'm remembering a friend of mine who, this is long before I'd ever heard of Enneagram, but looking back, I think he must have been a 4. And I remember the image came to me almost like a vision. I said, you have this huge radar dish that is your sensitivity. And if you aim that radar dish out at other people, you are like an empath. You get them. You see into their soul. You feel what they feel. If you aim it out into the universe, you're like this cosmic person. I said, but I feel like your radar dish fell off of its controller and is aimed inward, and you're getting this feedback loop of you're sensitive to your sensitivity, and you're it's just sucking you in, and I suppose that's this balance. That's what it feels to me. Part of the challenge of managing sensitivity is to be sensitive to yourself, your inner life. That's part of our quest for authenticity and self-knowledge and so on. But there's also some ability to turn that outward and use it as compassion for other people. And it might be one of the ways that in Buddhist thought, becoming a philosopher in the sense that you now are not only interested in your own personal suffering, but you're interested in the dynamics of suffering as a phenomenon in the world. Even that is a way of getting out of the tunnel at the end of the light.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I think it's both a comfort and an affront to a 4 when they realize they're just another bozo on the bus.
Yes.
That everybody, everybody is a recovering child.
Yes.
That, everybody carries their own abandonment, their own loss. And 4s want to say, yeah, but mine is a little bit more mine is, it's a little bit more twisted. It's a little darker. And it's like, sorry, pal. You don't get to, don't, please don't flatter yourself, be willing to get on the bus and realize we're all suffering. And how can I think this is what a healthy 4 can do, which is how can I move into the world with this empathic kind of intuition that I might alleviate suffering in the world, I remember recently listening to a person who I'm sure you have mixed feelings about. I have mixed feelings about, but I was listening to an interview that someone was having with Jordan Peterson, and in the interview, And he can get very overwrought, and periodically he says something brilliant, and then he says something so far off the rails you want to jump out a window. You know what I mean? Like, you just don't know what to make of him. And he has a lot of interesting 4 or 5-ish qualities, at the same time. But at any rate, he said, kids, if you don't know what you want to do with your lives and you're living at home and you're 23 years old, he says, I'll tell you what you can do. Go alleviate some suffering. There's plenty of it out there. You'll always have something to do. And I thought, well, that I can agree with, right? Go out and alleviate some suffering. Right. And I think that's when a 4 can go and access the healthy side of 2 and become more attuned to the feelings of others and less obsessed with their own, that's a good sign in the life of a 4. Hey everybody, one of the lessons I've learned over the years is that not everybody benefits from a traditional 50-minute counseling session. And this is why some people can go to couples therapy or personal counseling for a long time and never really get anywhere. This is why I'm such a believer of intensive counseling and my friends at Restoring the Soul in Colorado, created by my longtime friend Michael Cusick to help couples or individuals experience deep change in half-day blocks over 1 or 2 weeks. Now listen, if you can't wait months or years to get to the bottom of an issue or to experience breakthrough, you need to get in touch with my friend Michael and his extraordinary team of counselors at Restoring the Soul. If you're looking to get out of the rut you're in, but can't wait months or years, call Restoring the Soul today for a free consultation with Michael's staff. Call 303-932-9777 and learn how their intensive counseling process can help you. As a special bonus, just for Typology listeners, make sure to visit www.restoringthesoul.com/typology to download their PDF called 5 Ways Unaddressed Trauma May Be Derailing Your Relationships.
That's right. That's right. As you were saying that, I thought part of what was happening to me at that moment on the jogging trail, I think I'd been living under this, it had all kinds of theological dimensions, like I'm a Christian, I'm filled with the Holy Spirit. I'm just here to be concerned about others. I don't need to be concerned about myself. It was almost as if I was fighting that so hard. And when I realized, I'm kind of a mess. But it had the effect of me as saying, I'm just a human being. And that's where we come to it from a lot of different ways, but it's simultaneously knowing our own uniqueness and value, but also realizing, I'm just a human being.
Yes.
There are billions of us on this planet, and I'm just one of them. In my movie, I'm always on screen, so I think I'm the star. But no, on a bigger movie, I'm just one of billions, and everybody thinks they're the star of their own movie. But can we see that? I like how they say it, in the men's work that Richard Rohr does. Life is not about me. Mm-hmm. There's bigger things going on here, and there's that's not a way of diminishing our value, but I think it's a way of holding a important dynamic tension.
Yeah. So back to your experience on the running trail. Do you feel like now at this point in your life as a 4 that you have found that friend down inside of you?
I do. Yeah. I mean, the way I'd say it is, I have other problems I'm dealing with now. That doesn't feel like the biggest one. It feels like that is dealt with enough that that there are other things I'm that are occupying my attention. But I think I'll just tell you, over the following years, several things hit me. I'll tell you one of them that I imagine there might be 4 elements to this. But I had never gone to therapy, and I had never seen a counselor, and I'd never even seen a formal spiritual director. The funny thing, I was a pastor, but I'd never had much direct pastoral care. I did have great mentoring and great teachers, but I hadn't ever been the problem and I remember the first time I went to a therapist, and I had to find somebody who I had no connection with through the church or whatever else, because I didn't want a dual relationship. And I remember when I sat in the room with that person, he offered me a discount. I said, I don't want a discount, which is a big deal for a Scottish guy.
Right.
But I wanted to pay top dollar, because I think I had to say, I'm worth it. I don't deserve bargain therapy. But part of it was, I don't ever feel I'm with people who don't have another agenda for me. I'm their pastor, I'm their husband, I'm their father, I'm their son, I'm their business partner. And I remember having this feeling like I'm paying this guy money to just try to see me as a human being, And I realized how rare that was. And I think, I just think I spent a lot of years in my life never acknowledging that about me, that it's part of this. I'm just another person, so I deserve the same care and consideration anybody else does. I'm not disqualified by whatever this mysterious insufficiency is about me. So anyhow.
And how is that? I mean, when you think about the Enneagram and your family and your kids, how has it helped you there?
Well, again, I think the simplest, most positive thing done, it helped me have grace. Of course, my daughter, who's a 2, of course she takes on too much responsibility. Of course she, of course she's one of the most loving, kind people in the world. But, it is always going to take on one more problem, and instead of criticizing for that, I have to just understand that this is her starting point, right? Not that I'd want to criticize, but it's given me grace. Or my son, who's a 9, of course he doesn't feel the same responsibility I feel to solve every problem. It's just not the way he's in the world. He's got other gifts. He has the ability to create a certain kind of space for people that's undemanding, that I'll never have, So seeing each of my kids, it's allowed me to have grace and appreciate their strengths, and I also think one of the great gifts the Enneagram has is it de-absolutizes the normalcy of me. So
well said.
It allows me to say, yeah, this is my weird way of living in the world. This is my weird way of managing all my brain modules. Thank God other people have different ways of doing it, and I'm not normal. I'm not the norm by which anybody else is judged.
Yeah. Just switching gears a little bit as you were talking, I was thinking about this. So I was just thinking about, in a funny way, back over the arc of your career, you had a number of, they were very successful, very influential books. And then, there came a time when in the public sphere, in which you were very present, you came under a firestorm of criticism, theological criticism, as you evolved, as you began to share ideas in the marketplace of ideas that were threatening, or however we want to put it, right? In ways, I could laugh and say, in some ways, that Brian McLaren was Rob Bell before Rob Bell, and of course, Rob's a 7 and responded to that, onslaught of public criticism in his own way, and he and I've had a fascinating conversation about it together once. What it was like to be a 7 going through the meat grinder on the internet and in press. But I'm curious how a 4 did. How did you navigate that much criticism from the world at large as a 4 on the Enneagram?
So the first thing I'd say, Ian, is I'm really glad I didn't write my first book until I was 40, because I think that kind of criticism would have hurt a lot more when I was 25. I don't think I would have been able to handle it. I think it would have done psychological damage. I think it would have succeeded in scaring me back into my hole. Somebody just wrote a doctoral dissertation on some aspects of my work, and he asked me, my reactions to the dissertation, and I said I learned a whole lot about myself. He had read everything I'd written, and I realized I was saying things much earlier than I realized I was saying them. I was just saying them in a covert way, and so part of what I realize is my deference to the gatekeepers of my religious community. I was much farther ahead than anybody thought. I just was scared to say it because I had so much deference to the gatekeepers. And I guess part of being a 4 is I had to be true to myself, but yet I wasn't an 8 or a 7 ready to run recklessly or courageously or adventurously out into the unknown. So I was so covert, or I was so subtle, or I was so gentle in the way I did it. Now that might have helped people, and there are good things about that. But I think that my 4-ness made me have to speak my truth, but I didn't do it aggressively or recklessly. I did it very carefully. And I'll tell you what happened when all of that criticism hit. I remember thinking, is this the best they can do? I remember thinking, I could criticize my work 10 times more intensely than they've done. And I remember I just lost respect for these gatekeepers. I thought, they really have nothing. They really have nothing. Why have I been so afraid of them? So ironically, because I've been very careful, when the criticism came, in some ways it was liberating, because I thought, if this is the best they can do, I guess I'm okay. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Just closing in on something, the thing I'm going to take away from this conversation today was that amazing line from Abraham Lincoln. Could you just repeat it for me again?
Yeah. I've tried to conduct myself while in office, and this isn't a direct quote, but this is close. I've tried to conduct myself in office so that when I leave it, if I've lost every other friend on earth, I will still have a friend down inside of me.
Well, I think that's about as good a blessing to give 4s, to give any human being, right? Anthony probably tires of me using my phrase, which I'm always throwing around, which is the importance of unconditional self-friendship.
Yes. And
the idea that how surprised people look when you ask them, are you your own friend?
Yes.
It's as though it's crazy, but it in a world of relationships, none of us stop to ask the question, am I my own friend?
Yes.
And in most instances, when you ask people that question, they don't have an answer. And then probably later on the drive home, they realize the answer is no.
Yes.
I think that's the vast majority of people would say no. I'm ashamed to say it, but no. And what I carry from this conversation in those beautiful words of Lincoln is, I have an ongoing journey, even at 59, of becoming my own friend. Genuine friendship takes time between souls. And there are some days when I am a better friend to myself than others. Yeah. But for a 4 to seek out self-friendship is probably, that may actually summarize the journey for the 4. Mm-hmm. Which is, at the end of my life, that I would have a friend down inside of me. And I hope fours allow themselves that opportunity and open themselves to that possibility that they might, in fact, become their most beautiful advocate. Brian, you have 2 books coming up. I just want to let people know what they are. You have Faith After Doubt. You just told me you just sent your edits in. That comes out in spring 2021.
That's right.
And you have another book, Do I Stay Christian? That comes out in spring of 2022, you crazy writer, producer. I'm excited about these books, man.
I am too. The Faith After Doubt, as a writer, in some things you struggle and you work really hard. Faith After Doubt has just flowed. It's just flowed out of me. And I'm so happy with it. And I'm just about to start Do I Stay Christian? And I feel that question in so many people's hearts, including ministers,
Oh, yeah.
Forget, do I stay a minister? Deeper down, do I even stay a Christian? And what does that word even mean? And, so the complexities of religious belonging are really profound. And I have Jewish friends, every day. Benjamin Netanyahu makes it harder for them to stay Jewish because they realize that the word means something so different when it becomes a political thing as opposed to a spiritual thing. And I have Muslim friends who are struggling with it. And frankly, I have atheist friends who realize that their atheist identity has all kinds of complexities. So this is it's a human problem across religious traditions. But I think the Christian religion, as the religion with the most people, the most money, the most weapons in the world, it is a particularly fraught identity these days. So.
Well, I can't wait to read them, brother.
Thank you, my friend. Always good to talk to you. And thanks for the good work you're doing in helping people try to understand themselves and understand their neighbor. That's a good step.
Well, it feels like a good thing to get out of bed for every morning. So, Brian, we always close the show with the words of the great Oscar Wilde: be yourself. Everybody else is already taken. Peace to you, brother. Great to see you.
Thank you.